Back Look Cinema, the podcast. Thanks for the advice, Senator. You're right. I am going to ask you for money. And guess what else? You're going to give it to me. Y'all remember Dr. Heinz Kleindask, the Nobel laureate who helped us during the space program? Well, for the past 20 years, he's been keeping his face off the cover of Time magazine doing research. His field of research has been time travel. The funny thing is, the good doctor actually did it. I thought that'd get your attention. That's right, he did it. The technology's all in the photos in front of you. You won't understand it any better than I can. Now, you can't go forward because the future hasn't happened yet. However, you can go back, and that's where things get real tricky. Hi, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z-O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 157th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast. We take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that cop over there. Wait, he was just there. It's like he disappeared into nothingness. I will tell somebody about our humble little show. Now, I'm eager to talk about today's movie. First of all, sorry about missing an episode last week. I meant to put out this episode last week, but I didn't get it done. And I wish I could tell you that there was a valid reason for it. Like I was addicted to drugs, or I was homeless, or I got mugged or something like that. But I don't have a good excuse. I don't have a good reason. I can't tell you why I was not able to put this episode out last week. But I'm here. I'm back. We're back now. We're doing it now. And that's great. That's great because I'm excited to talk about this movie that I've been meaning to talk about for a long time. And it is a movie that I believe I saw in theaters, and there are two reasons I watched it. The first reason is that I love sci-fi, and the premise of the movie was very intriguing. And the second reason was it had one of my favorite action stars. So it was like, obviously, I'm going to watch this movie. So the movie that we're going to talk about is Timecop. For several years, Max Walker, a field operative of the Time Enforcement Commission, has been time traveling to the past to apprehend people for the improper use of time travel. One such person was his old partner who traded policing the timelines for making money from the illicit time traveling. When Walker arrests his former partner, Walker learns that this and other crimes may be tied to a very powerful U.S. senator. The same senator who happens to be the chairman of the Oversight Committee for the Time Enforcement Commission. This movie, Timecop, was released September 16, 1994, produced by Largo Entertainment, JVC Entertainment Networks, and Signature Pictures. It grossed over $44 million in the U.S. and Canada, and over $101 million worldwide on a reported budget of $27 million. Now, to have another way of looking at it, adjusting for inflation, if it were released in 2024, it would mean that it would have grossed over $93 million in the U.S. and Canada, and $214 million worldwide on a reported budget of $57 million. That might sound great at first glance. And it did warrant a sequel, or at least the talk of a sequel. It yielded other things. I'll talk about that later. But there are definitely people interested in continuing the story. However, when you look at how the money breaks down, it would seem that it was kind of a flop domestically. It was produced for $57 million if it were released today. And so in order for that to be profitable, or at least break even, it should be something like $110 million or something like that. It should have, that's in order to break even, but it didn't do that. It only made about $93 million if it were released today. So it came up just a tiny bit short. And what made up for it was the worldwide box office. The worldwide box office basically doubled what it did domestically. And that's what made it a profit. obviously this is came out in the 90s, so they definitely made it up in DVD sales and rentals. So this movie, the action star that I want to talk about is Jean-Claude Camille Francois van Varenberg, also known as Jean-Claude Van Damme. He plays the role of Agent Max Walker. You may have also seen him in JCVD, The Quest, Replicant, or The Order. I tried to put some of his lesser known works in there. And I haven't seen, well, actually, I don't think I've seen any of these. Maybe I've seen The Quest, or maybe not. I don't know. I get The Quest mixed up with Cyborg. I'm not sure which one of those I've seen. But these are some of his lesser known films. I have heard that JCVD is a really good film, and I think I want to go and hunt that down and watch it. Up next is Mia Sara. She plays Melissa Walker. You may have seen her in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Legend, Dorothy, and The Witches of Oz. But she's mostly seen on television. Ron Silver plays Senator Aaron McComb. You may have seen him in Reversal of Fortune, Find Me Guilty, or The Arrival. He's one of the highest profile actors besides Van Damme in this movie. Up next is Bruce McGill. He plays Commander Eugene Matuzak. I want to say Matuzak. And you may have seen him in Law Abiding Citizen, National Lampoon's Animal House, and My Cousin Vinny. And not for nothing, he played God in Quantum Leap. Or he was playing God, but he was being coy about it. But everybody knows he's God. Up next is Gloria Rubin. She plays Agent Sarah Fielding. You may have seen her in Lincoln from 2012, Admission, or My Dead Friend Zoe, or Zoe. It's the Z-O with the E. See, I don't spell my name like that. I tell you the beginning of every episode that my name is spelled Z-O. But some people spell theirs with Z-O-E. And that's fine too. However, she's not known for her movies, Gloria Rubin. She's mainly stay on television. So she's been on numerous TV shows. And if you've been watching television, you've probably seen her. Scott Bellis, he plays Ricky, and he's been in Antitrust and Little Women, the 1994 movie. Sasan Schombing, I think I'm saying that right. He plays Agent Lyle Atwood, and you may have seen him on The A-Team or Watchmen. Finally, Scott Lawrence, he plays George Spada, and you've seen him in Cloverfield or Avatar from 2009. I just want to distinguish the movie Avatar with the blue people, the Na'vi, from Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated or the live action. He hasn't been in any of those that I know of. I wanted to spotlight Scott Lawrence because it was that speech at the beginning of the movie that he gave, and it was a great performance. And he's always playing something like a businessman, a senator, or a high-ranking officer in the military. He's always one of those things. He's a character actor who plays that type of character. Someone who comes in, he's a black man with authority, comes in, takes charge, and basically straighten things out. And he's been on a lot of television shows playing that type of character. And it's really the only speech, the only monologue in the movie. And I wanted to read that because that monologue is what kind of drew me into the movie. When he begins the movie, he begins talking about time travel, basically setting up for the audience in the movie theater how the rules of time travel are going to work in this movie. So Timecop was directed by Peter Hyams. I think that's how you say that. I've talked about him before. You'd think I know how to pronounce his name. Anyway, he's directed movies such as 2010 or 2010, The Year We Make Contact, Outland, The Relic, The Musketeer, End of Days, and Running Scared, that we talked about on episode 39, one of the earlier days. And I have seen End of Days. I'm not sure if I like that movie or not. Maybe it deserves a rewatch to reevaluate how I feel about it. It's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie about the end of days. I don't know how it says it in the title. I can't improve upon perfection. This movie was written by Mark Verheiden and Mike Richardson. So Richardson, my namesake, is the creator of the Timecop comic book story from an anthology comic book called Dark Horse Comic, published by Dark Horse Comics. I think Richardson was like the editor-in-chief or the creator or owner of Dark Horse. And I know that he's involved in creating a lot of comic book stories and characters. And so Timecop was just one of them. It was in this research that I found out that, or was reacquainted with the fact that this is a comic book movie, technically and in real life. The story is based off a comic. And then Verheiden, he has written for The Mask, My Name is Bruce. And for TV, he's written Swamp Thing, Daredevil, and Constantine, and Hero. So he's neck deep in superhero lore. He writes superhero stories. He's written superhero stories for the movies, and he's written superhero stories for television. And then Daredevil is one of the best written television series about comic book heroes that's ever written, as well as the first season of Heroes. I didn't check to see which episodes of Heroes he wrote, but if he's involved in the first season of Heroes, then he was doing some good work, because Heroes, the first season, was outstanding. Up next, the score is by Mark Isham. He's also written a score. He's also scored for or composed music for Crash, The Accountant, Godfather of Harlem, 42, Judas and the Black Messiah, and Mr. Church, which I think has like a 70-something score on someplace, or maybe it's Rotten Tomatoes. It's like, I've always heard that Mr. Church was not a great movie, but I'm starting to hear whispers that maybe it was a great movie. Maybe I need to investigate Mr. Church. See, that's what happens when you let people just tell you that movies are bad. And I'm awful at this. Like, if I hear whispers that a movie is bad, if enough people are saying it, I will avoid the movie. It would have to be a very special case where I have to go, where I'll ignore what people are saying. Like, one of those cases was The Crow. Not that I heard people were saying that the movie was bad, but people were predicting that it was going to be bad. I'm talking about the Crow, the movie the remake that, well, I don't want to call it a remake, the newest adaptation that just came out in theaters this year. And people were saying, oh, this is going to be bad. And most of the time people are saying it's going to be bad because they don't want a new version of the Crow. They're living with the version of the Crow that came out in the 1990s that starred Bruce Lee's son. So it holds a special place in all of our hearts. It was the movie where Brandon Lee tragically passed away. And we are missing a great talent. But I don't mind a new adaptation. I don't mind people creating a new story around this. Unfortunately, the newest adaptation that was just released is it has some good things in it, but most of it is bad, and most of it is really not pleasant to experience. So that's it for the opening credits. And now, as for announcements, I've been promising this eBay store that I was going to put stuff out on eBay. And I still intend to do it. I'm going to continue to preach about this upcoming eBay shop. And then when you finally hear me tell you that it's out there and you can go see what I'm trying to get rid of, we can all rejoice together, because I would have gotten out of my whatever funk that I'm in that's preventing me from doing the work that I need to do. I will have overcome the funk. But in the meantime, you can go to backlookcinema.com/shop and go and check out some of my original work out there. I've got mugs, I've got t-shirts, I've got hoodies, all with drawings and designs that I've created. It's like I've always wanted to put some artwork on t-shirts. I don't know what my obsession is with putting art on t-shirts and having people buy it because it's good, because they have a need to own it and they're willing to give me money for it. And I want you to go to the website, check out the shop and see, at least look at the artwork and look at what I can do. I think it kind of started back in like the 80s, like the late 80s when I was in high school. There was a big thing with people like painting art onto like jean jackets or jeans or stretchy pants. And you were literally taking acrylic paint and painting the designs on the garment. And that was one of the things I did. I'm not going to say that I did it a whole bunch, and maybe a couple of times that I did it, but I was like, there's my artwork. Somebody is wearing my artwork. And I just want to continue that trend. So that's why I keep talking about backlookcinema.com/shop, where you can go there and you can check out some art. That's it for announcements. So let's check out what my 5 favorite parts are. Or maybe I should say, what are our 5 favorite parts? What are some of your favorite parts of Timecops? First of all, did you see Timecop? Did you enjoy Timecop? What were some of your favorite parts about Timecop? Now, this is a more interesting question than you think. It's interesting because there are a lot of, I didn't realize this, only when I was researching this movie, that there were a lot of plot holes in there. And here's the thing, it's a time travel movie. So in a time travel movie, there's going to be a lot of plot holes. But the thing about me is, it has to be glaring for the plot hole to like jump out at me. And sometimes, and it's not necessarily with time travel movies, but sometimes I can see the obvious glaring plot hole, but most of the time I don't. So it'll just pass over me and somebody will point it out. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess that is a massive plot hole. But most of the time I don't see it. And I didn't see the glaring plot holes in this movie. And that's what allowed me, that was one of the things that allowed me to enjoy it. So there were some things that I noted. This movie starts in 1994. So it was current time at the time the movie was released. And then as the story progressed, it fast forwards to 10 years in the future. So 2004. And that's the future part of the movie. So time travel was actually invented in 1994, modern times. And then fast forward 10 years and you got time cops going into the past to stop criminals from doing time travel stuff. I'm not necessarily saying that that's my favorite part of the movie is that it started in 1994. It's just something that I took note of. I liked the overall world building that this movie did. So you had the TEC, the Time Enforcement Commission. There's something that I love that they thought about what they were going to call the agency that sent cops through time. And like in the beginning of the movie, you have, I'm assuming that George Spada, I'm not sure how to say his name. That's the character's name. So the character George Spada, I don't know if he's like a presidential aide or he must be, because he's asking the congressman for money, and usually the agency that asks for money is the executive branch. So I think that he's probably part of the presidential science advisory team or something like that. He's NSA or I don't know, NASA, DARPA, who knows? He didn't say which agency he was from. And now that I think about it, I'm thinking it's probably DARPA because they get into that sci-fi stuff, that high-tech stuff, that cutting, bleeding edge of technology is the type of stuff that DARPA is into. At least that's what the video games tell me. But these are all assumptions. I like that they thought of all of this. Like they explaining to Congress that they need money to develop the time travel technology, which apparently somebody had developed first, because in the beginning of the movie they tell you that somebody has already gone through time. So it's possible that they had already built a couple of prototypes of the time machine, and they just needed more money to develop an agency around that time machine. And I like that it's called the TEC. I like that it's called the Time Enforcement Commission. I like the uniforms that the agents wear. I like the organization around it. I liked all of that. They have some funky looking cars. Like, they didn't know what cars would look like 10 years in the future. So they made the ugliest boxes on wheels that they could possibly think of. And that was the car. And today we have the Cybertruck. So they're not far off in designing these cars. It's like the over-designed version of the Cybertruck. These cars drive themselves. They apparently don't have windows. You just tell the car where you want to go and it takes you there. They weren't a huge feature in the movie. It's just that was part of the world building. You saw them, people used them, and they were just there to impress you that it was the future. As far as the fashion is concerned, that people didn't wear any like weird clothing like they like to do in sci-fi. There's nothing strange about what they were wearing, just regular clothes. So I like that because it kind of allows you to build a bridge to your suspension of disbelief. There's also the effect of them going through time. And I like the effect of them going through time. What it looks like when somebody appears in the past is that there's a ripple in the fabric of space. Like, it's a kind of like a ripple in the air that looks like somebody dropped water into a pool, and there's the ring of bubbles. It looks like reality is rippling around a central object, and then somebody comes through that ripple, and they're just like walking through, and the ripple continues, and then it vanishes, and the person is in the past, and they apparently can appear anywhere. They apparently don't have that much control over precisely where they'll be at. So they might appear over the tidal basin and fall into the water. They might appear on the street and have to duck under a tractor trailer, which is one of the better shots in the movie. They could be anywhere, but them appearing from the future and walking into the past, or them going from the past into the future, the same ripple effect. I really like that. So the overall world building is one of the things that I like. I will point out, there is a slight, I guess you can call it a plot hole. It's not even really a plot hole. It's just kind of like, it's kind of a thing where they made the time travel mechanism a little too complicated to where it was kind of dumb. So when they're in their agency, the Time Enforcement Agency, they have a sled, and the sled is a vehicle that the agents ride in. They slide this sled down a track, and at the end of the track is kind of like I guess it's the actual time travel mechanism. It looks like a kind of like a giant donut, and they slide towards it, and the idea is that it slings them into time, I guess, but the whole sled disappears. Like, in a successful time travel jump, the sled and its passengers disappear before it hits the donut, and they're just gone. And then when they appear in the past, they just appear out of air and start walking on the street or whatever, without the sled. The sled is gone. The sled has disappeared. Like the whole sled disappears when they go into the past. And then when the agent starts walking, the sled is gone. Like the sled is gone. So what happens to the sled? It doesn't, that part probably doesn't make any sense. They could have just made it where either the whole sled comes with them, like Back to the Future style, or they just walk through the donut. Because the donut is probably the most impressive. Like that's what they use in the posters. Like if you ever see the poster for Timecop, there's like a donut thing, and that's the time travel machine. And they could have just used that. They could have just had somebody walk through it, but they didn't. They had to add the sled. And then when they added the sled, it added an unnecessary complication to their story building. And it kind of like, you're kind of wondering where the sled is at when the agents end up in the past. The sled is gone. And then when they got to go back to the future, they got like a wristband. And I guess that since the future where they came from is still there, the future grabs them and pulls them back to the future when they activate this wristband. The only thing is that they end up in the sled again, and the sled slides them back into the agency. Like, how do they end up back in the sled? You know what? I'm talking way too much about this. I am so sorry. I'm trying to figure this out. And I've got only you to talk to, and you can't talk back. You just listen to me working in my head how this sled phenomena can work and not figuring it out. That's it. I'll admit that's a tiny little, like I said, it really doesn't have anything to do with a plot. It's just a convention that they're using in the story. And it's like with or without this convention, the plot will still work. So I wouldn't call it a plot hole, just an unnecessary complication. But anyways, let me continue with my favorite part. So all of the world building, I guess, except for the time sled, I guess. So one of my favorite scenes is there is the opening of the movie. This is before you actually get into the movie proper. It's a short, you can almost call it a cold open. So you have some Confederate soldiers. They're on their horses. They've got like a covered wagon. They're protecting and transporting some precious cargo. And then there's a man that's in the middle of the road. He's kind of blocking their way. And the Confederate soldiers is like, and they're very polite, but they're trying to get him to move out the way. And the guy's like, no, I'm not going to move out the way. You've got gold on there, and I'm going to take your gold. And this is just one man standing in the street, like seemingly unarmed. And the soldiers are like, well, I guess we're going to just have to move you out the way because we're soldiers and you're nobody. And then the guy who is blocking their path, he pulls out these two very futuristic looking semi-automatic pistols. Actually, they're automatic pistols. They're fully automatic pistols, and just starts mowing down these Confederate soldiers. And that was kind of funny. Not the mowing down the soldiers. Everything is kind of predictable because you know this is a time travel movie. And if there's a guy that's blazingly standing in front of hardened soldiers, then he's probably the time traveler. So you kind of knew it was going to happen. But I think that was kind of a fun watch. It was a fun way to get the audience to jump into this movie. It's like, okay, this is a movie about time travel. We're gonna throw it in your face, this time travel convention. Now these these fully automatic pistols were they were ordinary weapons, but they were gussied up to look like sci-fi versions of these of regular weapons. I can't tell you what type of weapons they were, but when I was reading through the trivia and whatnot, they were talking about the type of weapons that were used to represent future weapons. What they usually do in sci-fi movies, when they want the movie to be grounded, they want it to look real, but they want to give the soldiers or the police like futuristic looking weapons. They just get foreign weapons, right? They just get like something that was manufactured in Europe somewhere. So they'll have some European weapons. And for American audiences, it looks just alien enough to suggest that these weapons are from the future. But pay attention if you're not like somebody who's familiar with firearms, and the next time you watch a science fiction movie and they look like they're using some futuristic weapons, they're probably just European made weapons. So that's my commentary on props used in movies. So that's one of my favorite parts, the opening where the guy comes and he kills the Confederate soldiers, because the whole thing is like there's a lot of nifty dialogue. That's another thing I like about the movie. That I've gone on to three parts now. So this is my third one. The leads to my third ones. I really like the dialogue in this movie. It had a lot of I don't know. I don't want to say snappy, but it's interesting dialogue. It was like just something to hear. I appreciate good dialogue in a movie. I appreciate a good conversation between characters. I appreciate good banter. And so I think the script was pretty good. I think the writer and is credited to Mark Verheiden. I think he's pretty talented when it comes to characters having conversation. So there's a scene where you have the main character, that's Max, played by Jean-Claude, and he's meeting with his wife. And during this meeting, there is a guy on rollerblades, and as he's rolling by, he snatches a purse from a woman. Now, at this point, Max is already a police officer. So he goes and he confronts the purse snatcher. He stops him. And, he's like, you better give the purse back or I'm going to arrest you or I'm going to beat you up or whatever, something like that. And I think he does like kick him or something and gets the purse back and gives it to the woman. I can't remember the whole scene, but basically he's able to intimidate the criminal and return the property to the victim. But after this happens, he goes back to his wife. And she starts making fun of his accent because naturally Jean-Claude Van Damme has a thick French accent and he was never able to, while it's tamed over the years, I think he's never able to fully get rid of it. He probably has like a weird mixture of French and American by now. I was told one time by someone who's from Austria that Arnold Schwarzenegger sounds funny to them now. Like he doesn't sound like he's from Austria. He just sounds like he has a weird American accent. And of course, to us American, he sounds like he still has a foreign accent. Like he hasn't fully gotten rid of it, but we can fully understand what he's saying at the same time. So I think the same thing has happened to Van Damme, where he probably has kind of a messed up French accent where if he goes home to Belgium, it won't really sound like he's from Belgium. But over here in America, he doesn't really sound like like he was born and bred in America. It sounds like he's a foreigner. So his accent is kind of like in that strange no man's land. So anyway, his wife is making fun of his accent. And she said that the dude had to read his mind in order to find out what he was talking about. And he says back to her, "That's all right. I know all the good words," right? So I thought that was pretty cool. Another part that I liked was this is number 4, the apprehension of, so Max, he has to go back in time and get his partner, because his partner is Lyle Atwood. And his partner is basically, what his partner is doing is that he left the agency to become a time criminal. And so the rationale is basically that the reason that people are going back in time is that they built a couple of time travel devices. So the first one was a prototype. So somebody is basically somehow absconded with the prototype and has been using the prototype to send people back in time to basically either steal precious objects and then I don't know if they bring them to the future or if they hide them away for somebody to find in the future so that they can sell those precious objects or whatever. Or they'll, in the case of Agent Lyle Atwood, he was manipulating the stock market. Well, not really manipulating. What he does is that he travels into the 1920s. And of course, during that time, there's a stock market crash. So during that time, while the stocks are at the lowest that they've ever been, he'll look for a company that existed in the 1920s and see if they still exist in 2004. And he'll buy, while he's in the past, he'll buy as much of that stock as he can, so that by 2004, that future bank account that, well, it's not even, I don't know how stocks work. But anyways, his future self, I guess, can then sell the stock that's worth millions and millions of dollars. And that's how he's basically stealing money, by taking advantage of the fact that he's a time traveler. It's like in Back to the Future when they had this, is Back to the Future Part 2, when they had that sports book. They had the sports book from the future, and all you had to do was take it to the past. And no, wait a minute, how does it go? They had it from the future, and the people in the past found the sports book from the future, and then they could just make bets on all of the games. They knew who the person was going to win because they had a sports almanac from the future. Biff had that almanac, and that's how he got wealthy, because he kind of looks like the presidential candidate. He got all the money because he had stolen or found the sports almanac from the future. And that's basically what Agent Atwood is doing. He's doing the same type of scheme. Now, the Time Enforcement Commission does not cotton to that. They don't like that. They think that's a bad thing. So they send Max back because it's his partner. And there's a whole action sequence and everything in apprehending him. But they get him, and then he jumps out the window, and Max jumps after him, and he's able to fall and catch up with them. And then he activates the device that pulls them back to the future. And when they get to the future, it's funny because I'm doing all the lead up. I like those parts, but that's not the part that I want to talk about. The part I want to talk about is the part where Atwood goes before the judge, and the judge is like laying out all of his crimes and whatnot. And the funny thing is that Atwood does not have a lawyer. They're still in the United States. You would think that the rights that he has as an accused person would still apply. And I think that they should. I think this is probably a plot hole, that he does not have a lawyer. He does not have anybody representing him. And he's no good at representing himself because he just got caught. And it's like he's apprehended and they have the trial immediately. Like, he's not all of this setting bail, spending months in jail or anything of that nature. It's all about, as soon as he's apprehended, he's brought before a tribunal, and they decided that he is sentenced to death. And that's crazy. That is all crazy. That's a little too rough for me. That's a little too harsh. Because he's sent before the court. He has no lawyer. He's found guilty, and the punishment is death. It's I guess any time crime is punishable by death. And he's summarily executed, but they don't have like a special mechanism apparently for executing people. The thing about the TEC is that it's supposed to be covert. This is an underground organization. It's top secret. Nobody's supposed to know about it, which is one of the mysteries they have to solve, is who's gotten away with the other time machine, who's sending people back, because there really aren't. You really have to be an entire agency to be able to develop a time machine. So that's one of the mysteries they got to figure out. They got to figure out who's sending people back in time, and that's all part of the mystery. So that was wild. That the sentence is death. I guess they find him as like, this is unsanctioned. This is unsanctioned travel. You're going to die. So they send him back by himself. They don't send Max with him. They send him back by himself, and they sent him to the very point where they snatched him from. Now, if you remember from earlier, I said that he had jumped out a window. He was falling to his death because he didn't want to go back, because Max is trying to get some information. He's trying to coax Atwood to coming back to the future peaceably without fighting. But Atwood puts up a fight. So he loses the fight. And Max is like, you got to go back. And Atwood is like, well, they'll kill me. It's like, not that they'll kill me. They'll kill my family. They'll kill my whole family. They'll make it like my family has never been born. Right. So that's why he wilds out and jumps out the window. And Max jumps after him. And then when he grabs him, he hits his device and they both get pushed back to the future. But then they send Atwood back to the past from the very point where they snatched him from, falling to his death. And they just basically let nature let nature take its course. So he finished falling to his death and he died. So that was a great part. All of that to say that was one of my favorite parts. And I would say that my final favorite part is Ron Silver. Ron Silver was a fantastic actor. For some reason, he plays a bad guy so naturally that I thought that he always played bad guys, but apparently this is one of the few roles where he plays the villain, and he plays it so well. And he has a dialogue with himself, which is fantastic. He's able to aptly play like his younger, naive version of himself, that 1994 version of himself, and then the 2004 version of himself is ruthless. It's like after bloodthirsty and ruthless and all around evil. Like he'll go back to the past just to kill people, and he has a plan to just kind of wipe everybody out of his way. And he's using time travel to enrich himself so that he can win the presidential election. He's trying to become president of the United States, and he needs money. He doesn't really have that many donors. In this version of the future, which I'm starting to believe is the proper version, there was no Citizens United verdict. So there was not a lot of dark money that politicians could rely on. So they really had to rely on a lot of small donations, and then corporations were limited to how much money they could give candidates. And there were no such things as super PACs, because super PACs are evil and immoral and should not be allowed in American politics. People should not be able to give unlimited amounts of money to political candidates. That's too much. I'm sorry. That was too much. You didn't need to hear all that. But anyways, so he is struggling to raise money. So that's why he has a scheme to go back to the past, get money, bring it to the future so that he can have more money for his presidential campaign. And I just like that character. I like his plan. I like Ron Silver playing that character. It was great. He really made, I think as much as Jean-Claude Van Damme kicking people in the face, Ron Silver made this movie worth watching. Just being competent and skilled as he was in that role, along with some other actors. Also Bruce McGill, I want to shout out to him because I always like him when I see him. He just has that quiet, commanding confidence, and he has great dialogue, or he's able to deliver dialogue brilliantly. But really, it's Ron Silver. So that was those are my 5 favorite parts. And that I like the overall plot of the movie too. I was very pleased with that. I like that there was kind of that mystery component. So it's like the cop, he's just going routinely arresting criminals that go into the past, and then he finds out that it's bigger than just these random criminals. They're all tied to a network of this one dude trying to be president. And he was the one, because he's the chairman of the Time Enforcement Commission. He was the one that took the prototype time machine. He's the one that's sending everybody back through time, because you just can't be like a regular dude going back through time. You have to have some connections. So he surrounded himself with some ne'er-do-wells, or he bribed people from some of the officers and agents from the Time Enforcement Commission to work for him directly so that he can get away with his evil schemes. And there was some betrayal, like Agent Max was betrayed by somebody who was supposed to be his partner and all that kind of stuff. And then there was some great action sequences. I'm kind of going on and on. I know I said only 5, but I just want to embellish a little bit about some of the things that I loved about the movie. The overall action was really good, but I would say that compared to today's fight sequences, it's rather, even fight sequences from that time period, it's rather pedestrian. Like, it's like you always have Jean-Claude Van Damme working a split in some kind of way in every movie that he does. It's like when Arnold Schwarzenegger says, "I'll be back." He says, "I'll be back." Jean-Claude does a fantastic split, and they'll work that in there. But I do feel like those could have been better fight scenes, and they were just regular. And on this rewatch, I will say that I remember them being better. They're not as good as I remember them being. So it could have used better fight sequences. It could have used either a foot chase or a car chase. They could have done some more actiony movie things in this movie. And that's probably why it doesn't get as good a score as it should have, or it could have gotten. And we'll talk about the ratings in a minute. But before I get to the ratings, before I talk about what the critics talked about, let me give you the straight dope on the trivia top 10. So the trivia comes from IMDb, and to the best of my knowledge, this information is accurate. So let's talk about it. So this is the first movie together for action star Jean-Claude Van Damme and director Peter Hyams. They followed up the cooperation with Sudden Death from 1995 and Enemies Closer from 2013, and almost worked on a movie in between called Abominable before it was canceled. Van Damme later credited Hyams. I'm still not certain how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. It could be Hyams. He later credited Hyams as the only person who came to visit him while he was in rehab. Next, first Jean-Claude Van Damme movie to gross $100 million worldwide, and is his highest grossing solo movie as of 2024. So financially speaking, as a solo star of the movie, as the face on a poster, this is the only movie, or the highest grossing movie, that Van Damme ever did. The only movie that he did by himself to gross over $100 million worldwide. So I'm fascinated by this fact. It's like, he was one of my favorite action stars. I thought that he had done better, but apparently this is basically the high point of his career. So in a way, it was also the prelude to his downfall. By 1995, his success led to a studio offering him a 3-picture deal, which would have earned him $12 million per movie. That's a 50% increase in his $8 million salary for Street Fighter that he did in 1994. However, he demanded $20 million per film, the same as Jim Carrey's salary at the time. The studio balked at this proposal, as Carrey's movies still out-earned Van Damme's 3-1. So at that time, Carrey's movies had grossed collectively about $1.2 billion versus Van Damme movies grossing only $433 million. So how do you think your movie, barely making $500 million, is the same as Jim Carrey, whose movies have grossed over $1.2 billion? That's Jim Carrey. Of course he's going to get $20 million a picture. Why did you think he was worth that much? So later on, he explained that his rejection, which he did under the influence of alcohol and cocaine, was more about consolidating his Hollywood status than the money. This really tainted his reputation in the movie industry. This, coupled with several violent incidents and more drug abuse, led to consistently diminishing returns, fewer movie offers, as well as lower salaries. So he kind of played himself. He fucked around and he found out. Up next, the virtual reality scene. Oh, I did forget to tell you about this virtual reality nude scene. And so it's kind of, I'm not saying it's an accurate prediction of the future, but I don't know if they had virtual reality headsets in 1994 or if anybody had predicted them. But this is kind of like a prediction that people would wear headsets where they can have virtual reality sex. At least that's what it turned out to be, but that's what it wasn't originally. So let me read this. The virtual reality nude scene was originally supposed to be a nature documentary about beavers, not the sexual organ. We're talking about the animal, the actual animal, beavers. However, the off-site film team got drunk on the evening of the shooting and ended up in a strip bar. The next morning, they woke up and they realized they had missed the bus to the nature reserve and had to instead film one of the dancers they had met in the club the night before. Can you imagine being an adult dancer? What do they call it? An adult entertainment dancer, a stripper by any other means. And some guy comes up, some obviously hungover guy comes over to you and says, "Do you want to be in a movie totally naked?" I'm serious. I really am in the movie business and I want to film you naked. Like, apparently that's how the conversation went. So yeah, there's so they filmed this dancer naked. Like, basically the scene is like she's on a bed, she's naked, and it's almost like a point of view from the guy whoever is wearing the goggles. So there's a scene where this guy has these goggles on. He's supposed to be at his computer terminal working, but instead he's having virtual sex with these goggles on. And that was kind of a funny scene. And the only reason that the scene played out the way it did was because there were a couple of filmmakers who were supposed to be going to the nature reserve to film some beavers, and instead they got drunk, they fell asleep. They got drunk, they went to a strip club, they fell asleep after their visit to the strip club. They woke up late, they missed the bus to the nature reserve. So instead they went back to the strip club and they convinced one of the dancers to film a scene for their movie. All of that is mind-blowing. It's fascinating. The next one. The film inspired a short-lived television series, I alluded to this earlier, in 1997 called Timecop. And the it's a direct-to-video sequel, and that was called Timecop, The Berlin Decision. That came out in 2003, and it starred Jason Scott Lee and Thomas Ian Griffin. Just because Jason Scott Lee is in it makes me want to track down this movie and watch it. Neither the show nor the film has any direct links to the 1994 film. So what's interesting is that I did see the Timecop TV show. I don't know if I watched all the episodes. I think there were only like 9 episodes. Just one of the many sci-fi shows that I was enamored with, and I would try to watch these shows, but they would get canceled real quick. So if you're keeping score, Man and Machine, this one, Timecop, Misfits of Science, And then there's another one I've been thinking about lately that's called Automan. And then there's another one called Manimal. Oh man, I just love these shows. It's just crazy. The 1980s were crazy times. None of these shows lasted more than a couple of seasons at best, but I ate them up. Up next, in 1995, prolific French video game developer Cairo Interactive Entertainment developed 2D movie tie-in action game Timecop for the SNES. The game was loosely based on the first Timecop movie and featured realistic digitized graphics similar to those in the first Mortal Kombat games. So if you remember, like the original Mortal Kombat, it had digitized, I don't want to call them actors, but they're basically actors, or maybe they're stuntmen. They're digitized martial artists. Let's just put it that way. And they were being filmed and then doing these martial arts moves. And then they digitized those films. They put it in a game, and they created one of the greatest game franchises of all time. So this game by any SNES, or for SNES by Cairo Interactive Entertainment, used that same technique to make their game. The player is a time cop who must go after the inventor of the time travel technology and stop him from tampering with the past and the future over the course of 15 time-limited levels set to various eras. The game immediately fell into obscurity. Yeah, it was a failure, and why would it not be? Up next, according to Stephen Lambert, I don't know if it's Lambert or Lambert. He played Lansing. It's one of the bodyguards for Ron Silver's character, the senator. So during the shooting of the final action sequence of the film, Jean-Claude Van Damme had decided on changing the fight choreography at the last minute, but was shut down by director Peter Hyams. I'm still tripping up over that name. This enraged Van Damme so much that in the first take of his hand-to-hand fight with Lambert, he deliberately slugged him in the face without pulling the punch. The strike was strong enough to draw blood, but Lambert refused medical attention until the scene was filmed, believing that the real blood added to the sequence. Lambert later confronted Van Damme before he continued filming the fight scene, asking if they had a problem, but Van Damme just left it alone and walked away. Right? So Van Damme has a reputation for being kind of a jerk on the sets. Up next, this film marked one of the rare villain roles for Ron Silver. I alluded to that earlier, which follows his acclaimed performance in Catherine Bigelow's thriller Blue Steel 4 years earlier, which is probably the reason he was chosen as the villain for this film. Jean-Claude Van Damme's future version of himself has long hair, just as he did in Hard Target, which were extensions. You can see Van Damme's real hairstyle in the scenes playing his younger self, 1994, at the house and at the shopping mall where he meets with Mia Sara. Interestingly, the hairstyle that they chose in Timecop, essentially the future self with the long hair, is not just long. Like in Hard Target, it was long stringy hair. But in this movie, it's like feather. It's feathered hair. It's more of an 80s hairstyle than a 1994 hairstyle or a 2004 hairstyle. And I guess the notion was that what's old is new again. An old style comes back to haunt us, just like parachute pants. Like they go away, and all of a sudden you're walking down the street, somebody's wearing parachute pants again. So he had this big 80s hairband type hair that he was wearing, and it looked glorious. Like it was so impressive. So that's what he was rocking. While riding in the sled which would transport him to the future, Van Damme takes out a stick of black chewing gum, a Japanese brand. During 1994, Van Damme appeared in television commercials for black chewing gum in Japan. A lot of actors did commercials for Japan because they knew that they would not be seen in America. They still do it. There's still a lot of high profile American actors doing commercials in Japan and other foreign markets. And sometimes you can find these commercials on YouTube. But it was really prolific. Cause like you would be totally shocked when you see somebody like Clint Eastwood doing a Japanese beer commercial. It's like, wait a minute, he ain't supposed to be doing commercials. But they would get a lot of money to appear in these commercials. And they did it because for the most part, they knew that these commercials would never be seen in America, but now they can be. And the last bit of trivia that I have is that in an early scene in the movie, there is a characterization of people jumping from buildings because of the 1929 stock market crash. However, according to The Economist, John Kenneth Gilbrath, I'm sorry, I didn't pronounce his name either. In his book, The Great Crash, 1929, contrary to popular lore, there was no epidemic of suicide, let alone window jumpings in the wake of the stock market crash of 1929. So this is his assertions, and this is according to his research. Upon further investigation, I found that like there was some uptick in suicides, but it was like also the Great Depressions and a lot of other events that were going on at that time, but it's not necessarily due to the crash itself. And basically, we have this fantasy of like a whole bunch of like rich people losing everything and jumping out of office buildings. But apparently there were really only two people that actually jumped to their deaths. One was like a dude that had lost everything. And then another was, I don't know if they had lost everything, but that was their chosen method of self-destruction. But it wasn't, for some reason, I felt like maybe it was because it was popularized in the media. Maybe it was something that they taught in classrooms. But we all got this kind of narrative that there were a bunch of people just jumping out of office windows because of the stock market crash. And apparently that is an urban legend. So that's it for the trivia. Did you learn anything? Did I give you some interesting information about Timecop? Let me tell you, it was a little bit hard to find the most interest. It's not that there wasn't a lot of trivia, but a lot of it was kind of bland. And this was the most interesting trivia that I could find for this movie. So I hoped that it fascinated you. I am fascinated by finding trivia. And let's move on to the next part. All right, we're going to see what the critics' thoughts were. The critics gave it a 42% to audience, or Popcorn Meter has it at 37% on Rotten Tomatoes. On IMDb reviews, it has a 5.9 out of 10. So yeah, a relatively low scoring movie across the board. And I did not know this. I did not know it was so unpopular with critics and audiences. And this would explain why it sort of flopped in the US. If it was just released in US theaters, it would not have made its budget back. It would not have made its money back. It would not have broke even. So it was, it's funny how I remember enjoying this movie and this movie not doing well, but that happens sometimes. So we have Anderson Jones from the Detroit Free Press writing, directed by Peter Hyams, without an ounce of suspense, too much testosterone, and little or no reason, Timecop takes the fun out of what has to be one of the most enduring human fantasies, to go back and make things right. Now, I'm not sure I fully agree with him, but I can understand why he would say these things. I think in this instance, like there are a lot of times I'm criticizing the critics about their unfavorable takes on the movie. But in this case, I have to say, you know what? He probably has a point. As a matter of fact, even some of the most positive reviews that I found on Rotten Tomatoes weren't like glaringly positive. They were barely giving it a pass. Unlike Mike Massey from Gone with the Twins, he wrote, "It's not a great filmic exploration of time travel or science fiction themes, but it's still a decent amount of fun." So I think that's about as glowing a review as you're going to get. Brian Lowry from Variety wrote, "For the most part, Hyam's lackluster direction and the repetitive quality of the action sequences squander an intriguing premise and impressive production design, leaving few moments that elicit the sort of wow response such fare needs in order to proceed or prose or in order to be good." I don't know. I don't know what sometimes when you cut and paste, you're not paying attention to what you're doing and you don't proofread what you cut and paste. But sorry about that little bit. But yeah, I understand. I get the gist of what he is saying. And I kind of agree with this a little bit. I did kind of feel like the action sequences, or not the action sequences specifically. I mean the fighting sequences. Like the overall action sequences were pretty good, but the actual fighting, like the hand-to-hand combat or some of the gun battles, those could have been beefed up a little bit. I feel like you needed a Jackie Chan fight coordinator to spruce that up a little bit. And I also like what he said about the production design. That was one of my favorite things about the movie was the production design. So it's like he liked a lot of the same things that I liked, and he had a problem with some of the things that I might have had a problem with. Lastly, Joe Brown from the Washington Post wrote, "In spite of its glitches, Timecop is lots of fun and a blast from the past." I agree that Timecop is a lot of fun. And I had fun on the rewatch. I almost watched it again, but I didn't have time. Ironic. So that's it with what the critics thought. Finally, Timecop is, as of this recording, available with a subscription on Prime Video. The month of October is upon us, and I want to do something a little different this year. Now, knowing me, you understand that I am not a huge fan of the horror movies, of the scary things. I have a tendency to avoid them, especially if it's a particularly good horror movie that really gets your gold, if you understand what I mean. But I want to do something that I've been eager to do, something I've been thinking about. So as you listen to movie podcasts, you understand that we tend to veer towards the horror movie or the scary movie in the month of October because, you know, it's the month of Halloween. And I want to do something like that. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at some of the monster movies that I loved when I was growing up. Some of the movies that played on television in black and white. They were really old movies, but it was my introduction to horror. I can't say that these movies actually scared me, but the characters featured in these movies are thoroughly part of American culture. So I want to take a look at some of these movies. They are Frankenstein from 1931, Dracula from the same year, The Bride of Frankenstein from 1935, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954. I can tell you that I never watched any of these films from start to finish continuously. So this would be kind of like a first watch. I mean, I remember bits and pieces of each of these movies, but I can tell you when I was like 12 years old, around the time that I saw these movies, that they didn't like maintain my attention for the entire runtime. I was just there for the monster parts. And then I think my attention just kind of drifted off, or maybe I fell asleep, or maybe I went on to do something else. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm really eager to visit these films as an adult for Halloween season. We're going way past the red line as it concerns the normal subject matter of this podcast, but I really wanted to take a chance to talk about these, and I hope you'll join me for the conversation. You can follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Please contact us with any comments, questions, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. We'd love to hear from you. And also, once again, we're on YouTube, where you can leave a like or subscribe. I'd love to hear from you there too. One last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.